in vain. Here in our text, we see the actual desire of God here, no matter where you live, no matter what the leadership is like, we are to shine, as it says there. We are to shine. This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Matthew 5:16 says, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father which is in heaven. But not only are we to shine, but we're to hold forth the word of life. And I guess we can interpret that to mean a number of things. But if we're going to hold forth the word of life, that means you're going to grab a hold of it, you're going to take it with you, you're going to live it, and others, no doubt, will see it. So this is what God expects of us. And I think more often than not in these last days, people are looking for an excuse as to why they cannot do it. Kind of reminds me of David and Goliath. When everyone was coming up with an excuse why they couldn't take on the giant, and David said, is there not a cause? And I would suggest that we do have a cause to live right, to do right, to shine, and to live in accordance with his word so that others might see it. Now, the church here, obviously at Philippi, was a commendable congregation of believers. Their fellowship is praiseworthy. There's a number of verses that indicate that in the book itself. They had exhibited true fellowship in Philippians 1:5. They were fellow soldiers in their spiritual battles in Philippians 2:25. And their work was marked by cooperation as true yoke fellows and fellow laborers. And so they were a bunch of good fellows there. And so we can and we must live a Christian life that, regardless of our environment, we're going to purpose, like Daniel did. He purposed in his heart. And it's one of those things that we sing the song Resolved. There are a number of things that we can do and ought to do. Paul said in Philippians 4:11, he said, not that I speak in respect of want, he said, for I have learned in whatsoever state I am, therewith to be content. So our surroundings may change, the situations of the day may change, and we're supposed to learn through those differences, the ups and downs of life, the ins and outs, the heartaches, the disappointments, the good days and the bad alike. We're supposed to learn from them how to live this Christian life. But how do, I find it amazing here that he says this. The thing that we have to keep in mind is the fact that he's writing to a church in a locale. So he's writing to the Philippian believers, the Philippian church, but he's saying to them that they are living in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation. And if you know anything about Philippi, Philippi is a place that was named, it's after Philip of Macedonia, which actually was Alexander the Great's father. So it's named after him. And we don't really read a whole lot of bad things about the nation itself, the city, the locale in the book. We just read about the goings on of the believers, that the believers were doing this. And so because they were living right, the rest of the area, the situations going on, the things that were on the daily news report didn't really matter. And I think that that's what has to happen with us as well. Every day we wake up and we turn on the news and we just say, oh, not again. This is happening here, that's happening. Whether it's just a constant being spoon-fed. I was going to say food and sped. Have you ever been spoon-sped? Yeah. I haven't, but anyway, I want to use Jesus' life in the four Gospels as an example or a pattern of how we're supposed to live. And this is going to be necessary, I think, if whether you're living in America, or if you're living in Afghanistan, or if you're living in Argentina, or you're living in Antarctica. These things are going to have to apply. He said to them that they were doing these things. They were hopefully going to be blameless and harmless while still in the midst of a crooked and perverse nation. And I want to preach to that thought here tonight, living in a crooked and perverse nation. You want to apply it to this country? Go right ahead. You want to apply it to any other country? You want to apply it to Afghanistan? Go right ahead. As I said, as it relates to biblical Christianity, I think we would probably find that just about any nation on earth might be to some degree crooked and perverse as far as God is concerned. And so I want to give you these things and basically looking at how Jesus did it. We know the Philippians were expected to do it. Seems like they were almost being credited with doing it. But we know that Jesus did it. And I want to look at some of the things that Jesus did in his life while living in a crooked and perverse nation. And if Jesus could do it, and these were the, I'll call them the tactics or the example, the pattern that he exhibited, then maybe we could kind of relate to the same things. The first one that I see in trying to live a life that is going to shine and hold forth the word is found in Matthew chapter 2, where I'll just be blunt and say, you run away. You run away. Isn't that what's happening right now in Afghanistan? People are trying to get out. Why? Because the nation is so perverse, so crooked, so undesirable. What are they doing? They're running to get out. You say, well, Jesus did it. Jesus did it. In Matthew chapter 2, look with me in verse 11. It says, and when they were come, this is the wise men there, when they were come to the house, they saw the young child with Mary his mother, and fell down and worshipped him. And when they had opened their treasures, they presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And being warned of God in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed into their own country another way. Of course, whenever you come in contact with Jesus and you go home from there, you're going home another way. Anyway, and when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. And when he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, out of Egypt have I called my son. We don't oftentimes think about this as a means of coping or dealing with a crooked and perverse nation. But, you know, whether you're talking about a nation or you're talking about a town or a city, sometimes you just have to get out. I've told men in the jail that many times that their mere presence in jail has to do with the place that they were coming from, where they lived, who they associated with. And I said, some of you, when you get out of here, you're going to have to move to another place. And I've had some ridiculous characters say, well, I'll never leave my friends. Well, then you're probably destined to be back here again. Sometimes you just have to run. This is God's fix right here for Jesus. If Herod had had his way, he would have hunted him down and he would have killed him. And there was only one way for him to escape that, and God saw it and he said, run, Jesus. You know, it's kind of like the movie Forrest Gump. Run, Forrest, run. Well, that's what God said to Joseph to do with his family. Just get out. Just get out. You have to assess the danger and then determine what you're going to do from there. And one of the examples that we have is to flee. And so running away it may sound cowardly, but it's sensible if your life is in danger. There's nothing wrong with fleeing when your life, physical or spiritual, is in danger. In Matthew 24, picturing a future time for the tribulation period. You know, I know this sounds weird to run, because we're always, fight the good fight of faith and stand strong, all of this stuff. Yes, and there's a time to do that. But there's another time when it's just run. Get out. Move. Matthew 24, during the tribulation period. In verse 15 and 16, Jesus said, "When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation, spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place." You're going to see that happen, folks. That's what he said. "And when you see that, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains." Run. And then he goes on and he gets real specific about it, about not coming down and taking anything with you and all. Just run. Get out. And we're told as a means of coping and protecting to flee. Paul said in 1 Corinthians 6 and verse 18 that we were to flee fornication. He said in 1 Corinthians 10:14, we were to flee idolatry. In 2 Timothy 2 and verse 22, he said, flee youthful lusts. That is a tactic. That is a way of living in a crooked and perverse nation. And when you see a danger that's present and threatening, then if that's possible, run. I'll guarantee you that those people over in Afghanistan, and we're not talking spiritual, although we are talking spiritual in a way, these characters are being hunted down now. We can't even imagine that. Can you imagine going home tonight and having to wonder about a knock at the door or a light, a car pulling up in front of your house, and wondering whether or not it was the Taliban coming to kill you? So it's frightening, and you would run. And as I said, Jesus demonstrates, or at least the family of Jesus, I don't think he had a whole lot to say about it when he was an infant, but that was the first tactic that they did in order to live in a crooked and perverse nation. The second thing that I see is sometimes you're unaffected at all. You just, number two, remain active. You just do what you've always been doing. You don't give it a second thought. Remember how Daniel did that? They gave him this stern warning about, don't you ask any petition. So, okay, anything else you want to tell me? No, that's it. That's the warning. Okay. And he went home, and just like he did every day, he just got down in front of, I don't think he was showing off. I don't think he was trying to be, but he just continued to do as he'd always done. And we see that in Luke chapter 13. As I said, I picked an incident out of all four of the Gospels. Each one of them is a different exercise on the part of the Lord Jesus in living in a crooked and perverse nation. We saw running away in Matthew 2. Here in Luke 13 and verse 31 and 32, we see Jesus remaining active here. It says, the same day there came certain of the Pharisees, saying unto him, get thee out and depart hence, for Herod will kill thee. And he said unto them, go ye and tell that fox, behold, I cast out devils, and I do cures today and tomorrow, and the third day I shall be perfected. Nevertheless, I must walk today and tomorrow and the day following, for it cannot be that a prophet perish out of Jerusalem. Regardless of the threats, regardless of all the difficulties, it was like, oh, whatever, make all the threats you want, but I'm going to continue to do what I've always done. I'm going to do it today, and I'm going to do it tomorrow, and you tell that fox I said so. You just remain active. That is one way of living in a crooked or perverse nation. Now, we're going to go through these, but let me just tell you right now, I can't say when you need to do each one. You'll have to make that determination on your own. But in Matthew 16, in verse 24 and 25, then said Jesus unto his disciples, if any man will come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whosoever will save his life shall lose it, and whosoever will lose his life for my sake shall find it. There have been time and time again where people have stood their ground, where they just continued to do as they'd always done. Paul said, continue thou in the things that thou hast learned and been assured of. And sometimes that's the best course of action. You just keep doing what you've always done. Jesus said in Luke 19:13, occupy till I come. Well, he hasn't come, so we're just going to keep on doing it. In Acts chapter 8, now you would think here's a threat, here's a real difficult time that comes upon these believers in the early church. It says in Acts 8 in verse 1-4, and Saul was consenting unto death. You know, we don't see a whole lot of that stuff, at least not in this country. But then, and in certain parts of the world, in certain crooked and perverse nations, it is a matter of life and death. And it says Saul was consenting unto his death, and at that time there was a great persecution against the church, which was at Jerusalem. And they were all scattered abroad throughout the regions of Judea and Samaria, except the apostles. Gee, I wonder what they were doing. They might have been hiding in caves and, let me see. And devout men carried Stephen to his burial and made great lamentation over him. They didn't want to be a part of that. As for Saul, he made havoc of the church, entering into every house. Oh no, it sounds like Afghanistan. And hailing men and women, committing them to prison. Verse 4. Therefore, they that were scattered abroad went everywhere preaching the word. Seems like they were just totally unaffected by all of this coming. While living in this crooked and perverse nation where your life was on the line, they just remained active. They continued doing what they always did. Let me give you the third thing that I see that Jesus did. Not only did he run away in Matthew 2 and remain active in Luke 13, but in Mark chapter 12, he reached an agreement. Are you saying compromise? I'm not going to get into semantics, but I'll just stay with what I said. They reached an agreement. It says in Mark 12 in verse 13-17, and they sent unto him certain of the Pharisees and of the Herodians to catch him in his words. And when they were come, they say unto him, Master, we know that thou art true and carest for no man. For thou regardest not the person of men, but teachest the way of God in truth. It is lawful, or is it lawful, to give tribute to Caesar or not? Shall we give or shall we not give? But he, knowing their hypocrisy, said unto them, Why tempt ye me? Bring me a penny, that I may see it. And they brought it, and he saith unto them, Whose is this image and superscription? And they said unto him, Caesar's. And Jesus answering said unto them, Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And they marveled at him. You know what, the reason why I think they marveled was because they didn't expect that answer from him. I think they really expected that he was going to say, you tell Caesar to go fly a kite. But he didn't. He used his God-given wisdom here, and he just reached an agreement. He said, look, tell you what we're going to do. We're going to live our lives in this crooked and perverse nation, and we'll render to Caesar that which is Caesar's, but we're going to render to God that which is God's. And sometimes, folks, that's the stand we have to take. And we've got to be willing to move forward with that mindset. In Romans 13, in verse 6 and 7, the Bible said, For this cause pay ye tribute. For they are God's ministers, attending continually upon this very thing. Render therefore to all their dues. Tribute to whom tribute is due, custom to whom custom, fear to whom fear, honor to whom honor. Over in Matthew 21, in verse 23 to 27, it says, when he was come into the temple, the chief priests and the elders of the people came unto him as he was teaching, and said, by what authority doest thou these things? And who gave thee this authority? You know how the government always, these nations want to ask you, where'd you get your authority to do this? Well, Jesus answered and said unto them, I also will ask you one thing, which if you tell me, I and likewise will tell you by what authority I do these things. The baptism of John, whence was it? From heaven or of men? And they reasoned with themselves, saying, if we say from heaven, he will say unto us, why did you not believe him? But if we shall say of men, we fear the people, for all hold John as a prophet. And they answered Jesus and said, we cannot tell. And he said unto them, neither tell I you by what authority I do these things. It's just one of those things. As I said, you're just going to reach an agreement. You do your thing and I'm going to do mine. We'll go along and we'll render to Caesar that which is Caesar's. But that which is God's, we're going to know what it is, and that's what we're going to do. And if you want to try to impose your view upon us, well, you want to know where we got our authority? You can't even begin to know. Let me give you a last one here as well. This one's in the book of John. We've seen thus far that, I guess, while we live in this crooked and perverse nation, looking at Jesus as the example that we might follow, since there is an expectation that God has of the Philippian church, I would imagine he has it of each one of us as well. We're going to have to learn that sometimes we'll have to run away. Other times we'll have to just remain active. Others we'll have to reach an agreement. But this last one here that I see is probably the one you've been waiting for all along. We're going to have to rebuke authoritatively. In John chapter 19, in verse 7 to 12, the Jews answered him, "We have a law, and by our law he ought to die, because he made himself the Son of God." When Pilate therefore heard that saying, he was the more afraid, and went again into the judgment hall, and saith unto Jesus, "Whence art thou?" In other words, where are you from? But Jesus gave him no answer. That'll tick him off. Then saith Pilate unto him, "Speakest thou not unto me? Knowest thou not that I have power to crucify thee, and have power to release thee?" Immediately Jesus apologized for speaking or not speaking to him, said he was sorry, would never do it again. No, Jesus answered, "Thou couldst had no power at all against me, except it were given thee from above." Can you imagine being on the receiving end of that? Sweet Jesus just blurts this out. The guy that's not saying a word, all of a sudden rebukes Pilate authoritatively. And he goes on further and he says, "Therefore he that delivereth me unto thee hath the greater sin." And from thenceforth Pilate sought to release him. You know, sometimes, folks, we just have to stand up and speak the truth in love, speak it boldly. The righteous are as bold as a lion. And every now and then, you know what you'll find? You'll find that the crooked and perverse back down. They back down. They marveled at Jesus. They said, "He spake as one having authority." It's high time we stop making excuse for what we believe and the positions we hold. It says, "And from henceforth Pilate sought to release him. But the Jews cried out, saying, If thou let this man go, thou art not Caesar's friend. Whosoever maketh himself a king speaketh against Caesar." But even at that point, Pilate didn't say, oh, yeah, you're right. No. He heard what Jesus said, and there was enough authority in the voice of God to cause him to back down. In Acts chapter 5, in verse 28 and 29, remember, sometimes if you impose a little bit of punishment, physical punishment, give them a punch in the face, slap them upside the head, stick a knife in them, do something like that, they'll come around. Well, they said, did not we straitly command you that you should not teach in that name? And behold, you filled Jerusalem with your doctrine and intend to bring this man's blood upon us. And Peter immediately apologized and said he'd never do it again. No. And Peter and the other apostles, they're all on board with this. They answered and said, we ought to obey God rather than men. That's an authoritative rebuke right there. I can't tell you when to do that because, let's face it, depending upon how you respond, you may face the consequence. You have to be willing and ready to face the consequences of your actions. But I'm just giving you tonight some ways in which not only are we expected to do it, but ways in which Jesus did live in a crooked and perverse nation and did these things. In 2 Timothy 4, in verse 1 and 2, Paul said, I charge thee therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing in his kingdom, preach the word, be instant, in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all long suffering and doctrine. No apologies, just rear back, open the book and let it rip. Let me conclude with these thoughts. Paul said in Galatians 2:20, I'm crucified with Christ. He said, nevertheless I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by the faith of the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. The life that we have right now is all because of him. And because of him, well, we ought to live in such a fashion to where we will hopefully stand before him one day blameless and harmless in the midst, no doubt, of a crooked and perverse nation. In Romans 14:8, the Bible said, and whether we live unto the Lord. And whether we die unto the Lord. Whether we live, therefore, or die, we are the Lord's. You've been watching the Voice of Victory telecast, an outreach ministry of Solid Rock Bible Baptist Church in Blackstone, Massachusetts. We are an independent, King James Bible-believing Baptist church. Our goal is to reach people with the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ our Lord.